Welcome back to another episode of the Brett Snodgrass podcast. I am super excited for our guest, Mr. Todd Palmer. You guys are going to be rocked by this guy's story, and he is a coach, he is a thought leader, he is an author of a best-selling book, and he is just doing it all, blazing the trails for all the CEOs out there. Before we get to Todd, make sure you go to the Brett Snodgrass channel on YouTube, subscribe, and make sure you get all the videos that come out each week on the Brett Snodgrass channel. And also subscribe to our podcast on the audio channel as well on all of your podcast platforms. So like I said, I got Mr. Todd Palmer with us today. How you doing, Todd?
Oh, Brett, I'm super excited to be here. It's nice to talk to a fellow Midwesterner and to connect with your audience. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, man, I'm really excited. I was just reading about you and your bio, everything that you've done, your book that has on Amazon bestseller list, From Suck to Success, A Guide to Extraordinary Entrepreneurship, and just everything that you encompass. And you know, I'm just digging right now. So I want to go through just kind of everything that you've accomplished, and I'm going to miss a lot of things, but you can kind of fill us in as we go here. But Todd Palmer, he's an executive coach, keynote speaker, he's a thought leader, author, CEO, and he's committed to helping business owners tackle their obstacles and clear their path to success. Todd wrote the book From Suck to Success, A Guide to Extraordinary Entrepreneurship, and he goes through his story about how being from $600,000 in debt to making the Inc. 5000 America's fastest growing companies 6 times. Todd sometimes called as a chief rule breaker. He's also an amateur baseball player. He's walked with cheetahs in Africa, and he will light the room with his amazing storytelling approach to business. Welcome, Todd.
Oh, gosh. Can you just please go with me wherever I go and into every room I walk into? I've got to make a run to the grocery store later. Just go on the Kroger loudspeaker and just say that. It'll warm my heart.
Yes, man. That's awesome. Well, you got quite the story, and I just want to kind of start with that. So tell us about your story, Todd. You wrote the book From Suck to Success. So I guess my question is, how bad did you suck?
Oh, gosh. Do you have 3-4 hours? I can tell you the list is long, and some days it continues to grow. So for me, I got into entrepreneurship in my late 20s. I was like 26, 27 years old. And I had very much a mindset of, I'm going to build myself a job. I'm a rugged individualist. I know how, I can do sales, I can do marketing, I can do accounting, I can do all those different departments, which served me well as a startup entrepreneur. I was in the staffing space. I got into staffing in Metro Detroit during a time when the economy was booming and there were a lot more jobs than there were people. So if I had people, I could easily place them. Of course, I'm 27. I lack a little bit of self-awareness, a little bit of marketing awareness. And I thought, oh, look at how smart I am. I've got this. I'm crushing it. Day 72, we turned a profit. Well, pride, ego, arrogance, humility lack of humility was very much a cover up for me for my imposter syndrome. And my imposter syndrome often told me I'm not good enough. I'm not as good as this guy, or I have to have all the answers to all the problems all the time for everything. Fast forward 1997, 9 years into the business, 10 years into the business. I am $600,000 in debt on a $2 million run rate, which for your people who have a finance background listening to that, they're probably thinking, well, he's upside down. He's bankrupt. Yeah, he's done, which was what the bank told me when they called me in September of 2006 and said, we're calling the loan. We're taking your house. You and your kid, I was a single dad, will be homeless. And my imposter syndrome just flared. I couldn't get out of bed. My itty bitty shitty committee had 600,000 reasons to tell me how bad of a leader I was, how I had screwed it all up. And I realized for the first time, I really need some help. So I raised my hand. I hired a coach. Mind you, I'm $600,000 in debt. Hiring anybody spending money on anything at that point would be counterintuitive to most people. But I took the approach that I need to invest in me to be a better leader. I need to invest in me to get out of the doom loop in my head. And thankfully, that's what the coach was able to help me do. It comes to Detroit, takes a look at the numbers. I don't understand my numbers. God forbid I would understand them as a CEO, right? Well, I didn't ask anybody how to read them. And because the business had been doing well, I thought, well, I got this. Made a couple of tweaks and adjustments. September 9th of 2006, we walk in, make some difficult staffing changes. I fired my entire company in one day and started over. Changed the way I hired. I used to only hire people with backgrounds in HR or recruiting. I hired good people with great core values. I hired them for their DNA, not for their resume. I taught them to be good recruiters. Fast forward over 8 years, we pay off all $600,000 in debt in full, and we hockey stick that business and become one of America's fastest growing companies on the Inc. 5000 a crazy 6 times. And in that process, we figured out a lot of things. We realized that, failure is just a construct. I used to think failure was permanent. Failure was all about me, and I was a failure. So if the business was doing great, I was doing great. If the business was doing poor, I sucked. Pivoted out of that, realized that, when we fail, we don't really, or when something doesn't work, we learn something. We don't really fail, we learn. So a lot of mind swaps to get me out of sucking, to get me to deal with my imposter syndrome. 7 years ago, I meet a gentleman by the name of Dr. Danny Friedland. He's one of America's leading neuroscientists, and he's currently my coach. So I've used him for 7 years. Prior to that, the 7 years, I used a guy named Greg Palmer, my brother, as my coach. So imagine having to hire your brother, pay your brother to help you stop sucking, and your older brother, who's a rock star in his space. Yeah, lots of shit going on in my head, man. Pivoted out of that, working with Danny, but I'm still not happy, still not satisfied. Listen, the pressure was off, dug out of the debt. But I'm sitting there at the Inc. Awards for the 6th time thinking, is this all there is? Isn't there more? And Danny and I really started working on the inside out leadership of what I needed to do, the inside out part of how I needed to show up. Because I find a lot of entrepreneurs, and I suffered from this, we fill up the internal emptiness with the external validation of being a CEO, the external validation of making the Inc. 5000 6 times, the external validation of doing media, whatever that is. That's what we plug in. But that's got a diminishing return. It's a very weak spike of dopamine. It's a focus on happy. I need to switch from focusing on happy to focusing on being satisfied. 4 years ago, I retired from that company and I got into coaching. I'd been coaching people informally for give or take 15 years, part of a group called EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization. In there, we've got a generation down of entrepreneurs who want to grow into being multi-million-dollar companies. And I volunteered. Got a group of 6, 4 of them made it within a year. Like, that was super fun. I got super excited about their success. I got a lot of enjoyment watching them grow as leaders. Told this to some trusted advisors, very much was burning out on being a recruiter or being a CEO. And I pivoted into that space 4 years ago. Since then, I worked with a guy named Tom. Give me a great video testimonial on my website where he talks about his first year with me. I really pressed on him because I am a CEO. A lot of coaches have never been CEOs. I am a CEO, and I pressed on him to make some have some tough conversations, to make some tough choices to grow his business. He trusted me. He did those. His revenue grew 70%. His profits grew 500%. He started really growing, and he's built a life he loves. So that's the joy I get out of coaching people now, is helping them build a life by design that they can really love, and kind of put a bow on it, taking them from their internal suck to success by creating an extraordinary singular life that's important and valuable to the individual.
Wow, Todd. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story here. And I know that I'm just writing down all the notes that you've kind of pointed out. So number one, I want to backtrack to the imposter syndrome. So you mentioned that a few different times in your story, that you felt like an imposter. When you're coaching other CEOs, sometimes they feel like an imposter. So describe, what is imposter syndrome?
Well, I think it's an individual thing, first of all. I mean, I think there's variances to it. A lot of people experience imposter syndrome as parents. A lot of people experience imposter syndrome in their relationships. It would sound something like this. Oh, wow, I can't believe he or she is with me. Don't they know what a mess I am? Well, I'm my buddy calls it, I'm out kicking my coverage. How did I get her, or how did I get him?
I hear people say, I married up. Like they're so much better.
Yeah. Or you see this from parents, that family's got it all figured out. They live in a nice house. Their kids go to private school. They're all doing well academically. They're all athletic, or whatever their definition of success is. The imposter syndrome at its core, as I've experienced, is negating our accomplishments, negating our worth, and transferring that value and that validation to an external source. So I stink as a CEO because my friends are better CEOs. I stink as a parent because my neighbors, seem like they have their act together more than I did. And when I coach people, I often have to really unpeel those layers of ick and sludge in self applied misery to get them to their true essence of who they are and what do they want. Part of the imposter syndrome for a lot of people is they feel really uncomfortable putting a stake in the ground and saying what they want, because they confuse self-care with selfish. They confuse creating a life by design that maybe is in contradiction to the household they grew up in. So it gets really complicated for some folks sometimes, Brett.
No, so you kind of weed through this junk. And
yeah.
Do you think that the imposter syndrome today, it's a lot worse than it was a decade ago, 20 years ago? Is it become worse? Like, are people feel?
I love that question. So I'm not gonna. So to answer your question directly, I think yes, but I'm going to use another example. I saw the speaker. I'm blessed to be part of an entrepreneurial enclave called the Gathering of Titans. Meets every year at MIT. It's some of the most successful entrepreneurs in the world. And again, my imposter syndrome is somehow I got in that room. And we have a young man comes to speak with us. I think he was later, but 19 or 20. And he is just telling us what it's like to be him and to be in this world of social media validation. And he tells us a story of a young lady he's dating and how they can't get out the door for dinner on a Friday night because she's got to, put the makeup on, do the hair, all those different things, which I know a lot of women do. We want people to feel good, right? I'm going to put my best face foot forward and we're going to dinner. She couldn't get out the door because she wasn't getting enough likes on her Instagram post to help her feel confident to go into her evening. Now that is some major imposter syndrome that is new generation. So if you're not getting enough likes or you're not getting enough feedback from an external, then what is your internal track? What is your internal imposter syndrome? And he put up a picture. He was really prepared for the presentation. Picture of he and his girlfriend together. I mean, she was stunning. And it was a dress down picture. They had a day at the beach kind of thing. They got ball caps on. I'm thinking, I felt I felt sad for her that her image of who she is as a young lady is so externally driven by most likely either a bunch of strangers or people maybe they're not really your friends.
Yeah. Or people maybe people just aren't on Instagram that day.
or in that moment. And it was, to your point, it is that snapshot in time.
Yeah.
And I'm talking to you right now. I'm currently not on Instagram. I hope someone's not looking for me to validate how awesome they are right now, because I'm with you.
No, definitely. So that's just an example of social media, but it's all the external forces. And I've been talking to a lot of guys. I think it has become worse. I talk to other entrepreneurs. They're always comparing themselves, and I think a lot of it is the comparison trap. It's like everything that you talked about is when you see this guy has this or this much money or lives in this really nice home or these beautiful kids or beautiful wife, and you start to feel like, well, I don't have that. I can't measure up. So a lot of it is just kind of measuring yourself. Wouldn't you say? Like, how do you measure yourself?
I think yes. And so when you said that, what came up for me is people have a lot of fears. The fears that I'm not enough, fears that I don't have enough, which to me takes you into more of a scarcity mindset versus an abundance mindset. And I was really blessed. I think I sent you the video. I got invited to go speak at the University of South Africa. And part of that process was I did get to go walk with cheetahs. But also part of it was I got to spend some amazing time with some of the most centered people in the world from Zambia. And these are people who had me come and talk about entrepreneurship, where their micro loans are $32 US. So they're getting loans for $32. And they hear the story of being $600,000 in debt. Like literally, they're like saying, hey, when I was younger, I used to walk on Venus. I just got on a rocket. I used to walk. Like they couldn't wrap their brains around that. But what they had was many of them had an abundance mindset, because they defined success very differently than a lot of entrepreneurs define success. And a lot of entrepreneurs, in my experience, I was one of those. I was only successful if I got to a $20 million company, because that was the number to sell in my space. That was the only definition of success. It wasn't $20 million at a EBITDA of 30%. It was just $20 million, which helped get me into debt because I was driving towards an unattainable number based upon the model I was running. when I was with the folks in Zambia, they were they were heart-centered people. They were about family and community and connecting and appreciation and gratitude. And so, I had this pivot about 7 years ago where I pivoted away from my definition of success was the revenue, the awards, the external. And I decided, what success for me is doing what I want, where I want, with whom I want, as often as I want to do it. So I bring that to Zambia and I tell that to them. And they're like, well, of course, that's the norm down here. That's the way you should live. I'm like, whoa, I had no idea. So to your point, it's like, there's so much, we can have abundance anywhere you go. My purpose in life is to improve lives. I can improve lives by being on your show today. Hopefully someone hears one thing, they get a takeaway, an aha moment, a little nugget. Great. I have to go. I think I mentioned I got to go grocery shopping later. If I could talk to anybody in the grocery store and I'm having a conversation with somebody and I say one thing to get them unstuck, to get them clearing out, realize there is abundance and there isn't scarcity in every circumstance. That's a gift, and that makes me feel good. It makes them feel good. But it goes to the point of the perception we apply to our situation is so important.
Love it. Love it. Rich conversations. You said something before. You talked about whenever you coach someone, you start with kind of building their life, building their extraordinary life. It's not, the word awesome or extraordinary isn't like this is what it is. This is the dictionary of extraordinary life or awesome. It's building their awesome extraordinary life, and you talk about designing it, right? So whenever you meet with a client, where do you start with that? I mean, get me going. So I'm a client, and where do you kind of start?
Well, so what I find when people hire a coach, first of all, there has to be chemistry. And the chemistry comes from oftentimes, and my clients have reported to me, that they see something in my story or the way I do things that either they need or that they can so relate to. So I think part of being a coach is you got to show up and be authentic, transparent, and vulnerable. I've got to be seen. I've got to be heard. I've got to be known. And then I have the permission to have a conversation for fit. That's how I do it. And my coaching program is very hands-on because it is an extraordinary process. Because it's extraordinary, it's singular. So I meet all my clients exactly the same way. I treat them all the same. I treat them as individuals, and I meet them individually where they are. That's my universal mantra. So I start off by asking them what do they want and what's working and what's not working. And for me, it's work-life integration. I don't just coach them on a process like an EOS or a scaling up to put into their business. I use those tools. Those tools are valuable. In addition to those tools, I ask them, what's the bottleneck in your business? What's the bottleneck in your life? What's holding you back? I've been working with a client. I just talked to him this morning. It's taken him 3 years to figure out what's holding him back. We've had this conversation numerous times. And he goes, why haven't you ever said this to me before? Now there's two partners. His partner's looking at me and I'm like, I've said this to you 100 times. You're finally ready to hear it. And his partner's like whacking him on the shoulder, like, dude, he's been telling you this for years. They've got to be ready. I've got to meet them where they are. So my process is I approach everything with massive curiosity. You want to have a $20 million company? Great. That's possible. I want to validate that because it is possible. How do we get you there? What's holding you back? I want to be curious around why you're not there yet. And double down and double down and double down. And then we can become massively accountable. So I talk to my clients once a week. I do quarterly planning sessions with them. And I'm available to them 24/7, 365 on text or email or call because it's why do I coach? Because those light bulb moments of awareness that I want to be a part of.
I love it. Have you ever been with a client where the very first meeting you say, what do you want? And they start to describe what they want, but then later on, months later, you realize that's not what they want at all? It's something completely different?
Nearly every time.
Okay.
Nearly every time. So they'll say what they want. And so I had a client. They hired me to help them grow and scale and sell. They wanted to sell their business within 5 years. I'm like, okay, this will be a 5-year engagement. Perfect. Happy to do it. Started working through what their issues were. So that was our original BHAG. We're going to sell this business within 5 years. Well, they weren't scaling. They weren't growing. And the owner was getting very, very frustrated. He had a leader on his team who wasn't doing his job. He was the chief marketing officer. Kind of important if you want to get customers. They have to know you exist.
Yeah.
And I said to the leader, because he's, again, losing his mind, He goes, I said, do you know the top 5 things this person needs to do their job successfully? Again, curiosity. He goes, absolutely. He lists them off like a list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Perfect. I said, coach, I said, I understand that you need to do those, that he needs to do those things. We've talked to him numerous times about doing them. He says he's going to do them. He's giving you a false yes. But, Christopher Voss talks about this in his great book, Never Split the Difference. It's first yes is a false yes. You got to get them to the third yes. I said, all right, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go down the hallway and I want you to have him start on that list of 5 things. He goes, okay, I'm going to do it. And I said, well, no, I can wait. And he goes, you want me to go do this right now? I said, yeah, I've been hearing lip service around this. Why won't you go do it? I don't know where he says, I'm afraid he's not going to do it. And when he doesn't do it, I'm afraid you're going to press me to fire him. And I'm a nice guy. Nice guys don't fire people. There's the root issue.
Yeah.
So we talked through his, because it's certainly uncomfortable. Talked about that. Because really when you fire someone, you're freeing them up to go do something they probably should already have been doing. People don't like change. To kind of wrap the story up, he does walk down the hall, does the 5 things, gets back on the phone. Okay, I told him, great, cool. I'm going to check in with you tomorrow and see how this is going. Well, what do you mean? Well, we've had this conversation numerous times. He's committed to doing it. Now let's see if he actually does it. And here's what I need you to do. I'm going to hold you accountable so you can hold him accountable. Are we in agreement? Yeah. Perfect. Next day, text, how's it going? Didn't start yet. It's on a Thursday. Friday morning, I've already put a note in my phone, text client 4 p.m., see how the week concluded. Because again, I'm very invested in his success. Remember, this is his definition of an extraordinary life. This is what he wanted. I'm holding him accountable to what he wanted. If he doesn't want that anymore, that's okay. Change the goal. Friday morning, phone rings. I just want to let you know, let so-and-so go. Oh, 12 months later, revenue's up 70%, profits are up 500%. He decides, doesn't want to sell the business anymore. He loves his business. His business now gives him energy versus taking energy. So kind of a long story, but when something gives us energy, we want to keep it in our lives. When something depletes our energy, we want to get rid of it. We moved him from something that was sucking his energy like an energy vampire to something that was giving him energy like radiant sun. And now he's on a fast growth trajectory.
No, I love that. I love that. You mentioned the word accountability, and I think that you've talked about this a lot. I've heard you on other podcasts talk about accountability. How big is that? And as you as a coach, I mean, is that like your top thing that you help keep CEOs accountable because they don't have any accountability partner?
So most entrepreneurs, and I was classic for this, I can't speak from experience. We become entrepreneurs because we don't want a boss.
Yeah.
I don't want someone telling me what to do. And what I didn't realize is I did have a boss, and the boss was the bank. And the bank said, you're going to pay me because your contract says you will. And if you don't pay me, the house you enjoy with your kid is going to now be ours. So you can go have a tent and go live in the park. How does that sound? Ooh, world's worst boss ever.
Yeah.
But highly motivating. As a coach, I find that because my coaches I've given them permission to hold me accountable to what I want in my extraordinary life. I need to do that for my clients because we're going to be massively curious. We're going to have them set a goal they want. We're going to have them be intentional about achieving that goal. They're going to have strategies around that intention to achieve that goal. But inevitably, there's going to be a break in the chain. Something's not going to happen. And most of the time, it's because of the difficult conversations we have to have with others, the difficult internal conversations we need to have with self. And someone needs to hold us accountable on how to do those things, to how to make those decisions, to how to show up where we need to show up. If you want to hire somebody, for example, and you say, hey, I'm going to hire somebody, great. We're talking next week. I'm going to make a note. I'm going to ask you how to go. You haven't hired him yet. What's going on? I haven't made the offer yet. What's holding you back? I decided to go away for the weekend. This is the battle for talent. Goldman Sachs just had a report that came out yesterday that by the end of the year, the unemployment rate is going to be 3.2%. That's their projection. And I said to him, 4% is full employment. So there's actually going to be more jobs than there are people by the end of the year. Your guy's going to be gone. Calls me up. How did you know? He's gone. He got 3 other offers. I'm like, that's how it works. So as the coach, so now the client's got egg on his face. The client's looking in his mirror and I'm holding it up to him. His imposter syndrome is like, I screwed this up. This is all my fault. Blah, blah, blah. This is a learning opportunity. What will you do differently next time? Make the offer within 48 hours. That's the right answer. Next time we do. And so he's got someone else. We're going to have that conversation. as the coach, I have to help them do some internal to grow. It's like, if you go to the gym and you're just doing the same weight for 5 years, your muscles aren't going to grow. Mm-hmm. It's just not going to happen. There's got to be a little discomfort, a little pain.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree. Totally agree. So I think accountability is huge. So you not only hold the CEO accountable, but you also help them hold other people accountable, because that was always my flaw. I had a very hard time holding people accountable. I didn't like conflict. I was a nice guy. I didn't like firing people. And I didn't like asking the tough questions. I didn't even like saying, hey, you said you were going to go on 10 appointments last week. Did you? I didn't like asking that question because the answer might be no.
So to that point, though, if you put a process in place and on Wednesday when you have your meeting that you're going to ask the question, and as your salesperson, I'm going to get asked the question, takes all the artificial harmony out of the room. I know you're going to ask me. You know you're going to ask me.
Right.
It's when I give you some answer that your spidey senses start tingling. Like, that doesn't sound right. Yeah. That doesn't feel right. What's going on?
Don't put me on a spot.
Yeah, well... And but there is, in having that creative tension there, the flip of that is, and this is where, honestly, Brett, this is where I see it more often. The employer, the leader, the CEO, the entrepreneur says, I'm going to do something to his team, and he doesn't do it. And they're all looking at him like, what the hell? And that's where I got to come in, because they get defensive. Well, I don't have to do that. I don't work for them. They work for me. And all this story they tell themselves. And like, well, did you or did you not make a promise? Did you or did you not make a commitment? And if you weren't going to do that promise or that commitment, did you go in and proactively renegotiate it? No. Yes, I did. I made the promise. Yes, I made the commitment. No, I didn't proactively renegotiate that. Tell me why. And often in that question alone, the thread starts to unravel. They start showing up as their more authentic self, with pride and ego, defensiveness, imposter syndrome. Because if it's hysterical, it's historical. If it's a behavior pattern they've exhibited, there's a track record to that. And if we can get them to understand why they do what they do, they have the self-awareness around that, the ownership of changing the behavior pattern, that's where they can go to their staff and say, listen, I'm an authentic, transparent, and vulnerable CEO. I screwed up. Here's why I didn't do what I wanted to do. Here's why I didn't do what I said I was going to do. And I am really sorry. And here's how I want to make this up to the team. Here's how I'm going to show up differently. And here's how Todd's going to hold me accountable. That's typically how it goes. So the team now has access to Todd. Hey, Brett didn't show up for a sales appointment. He got an opportunity to go golfing. Unless he's golfing with Elon Musk or Ellen Mullally or someone who's going to, grow their business exponentially, why weren't you there and why didn't you share? Because what we as leaders will often do is we will exhibit behaviors and create, a ripple, a tide effect through our organizations that we wouldn't accept from others, but we expect them to accept them from us. And that's dysfunctional.
Definitely. And you talked about this too, living your life with ATV. You've mentioned it: authenticity, transparency, vulnerability. Most men, especially men, kind of live the opposite of that. Like, it makes us feel very uncomfortable. But this is like really, this is like your big thing, right? Like, they have to do this with you, number one, but also you help them be authentic and vulnerable with their teams too.
God, let me tell you, no one's ever asked this, so I got to share this with you. It starts with me as the leader. It starts with me as the coach. So I was just in Texas, and I was there 9-10 CEOs in the room. And I actually wrote the process out for how I got them, because one guy had a breakthrough of something he's been dealing with for 8 years in less than 45 minutes. Here's how you do it. You show up and you be real. The first story I always tell to everybody I meet is this 2006 story of being $600,000 in debt on a $2 million run rate, firing my entire company one day, giving up on being an prideful, egotistical jerk, and hiring a coach. And then here's what the result I've got from that. And here's the pain and struggle I went through. I set the bar for what vulnerability looks like. I control that. I don't walk in and say, hey, Brett, I'm going to go to this book here and tell you how you should be vulnerable. Or I'm going to go, here's Brene Brown, who's, the queen of vulnerability. She does great work. I love her stuff. And I could talk about Brene, but I'm going to talk about me. I'm going to talk about client examples. I'm going to tell you stories of people who are just like you and I. That creates the vulnerability. The second piece is, through massive curiosity and not judging anyone, I'm able to create what they call a safe space of psychological safety in that room. And if done correctly, I can probably get that done in less than 12 minutes.
Mm.
So that a leader, an employee, whomever can now, okay, yeah, I guess I can talk about this thing. What we as men specifically want to do is we want to jump in and solve the problem. What we as men want to do, because we want to solve the problem, we think we know the problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's never what they say it was. The guy who had the breakthrough after 8 years, it was I don't know, how do I make more time for my buddies' conversation? I want to hang out with my guys more. To 45 minutes later, got him down to, I've lost my purpose and direction in the world. I don't think I have any friends. I'm not sure I'm worthy of having friends. That's a real life-changing, transformative conversation. Not, hey, how do I use my calendar better to fit my friends in?
Yeah, yeah. That's deeply rooted too. That's that's crazy. So you really dig into the clients, you dig into the CEO, not just say, hey, here's the process, like the EOS process. We use EOS for our business or scaling up, like you mentioned. That's a great process. It's a good tool.
Sure. They're all great tools.
Yeah. But that's, if you want to scale your business and make that $20 million company, that's a great process.
But it's a process.
Yeah.
A hammer is a tool. But if I need a screwdriver, hitting the screw with a hammer is not going to solve the problem. Mm-hmm. EOS is a great process. In EOS, because it is a simple process, is often self-implemented. And I've got friends of mine who are EOS implementers, stellar human beings. They bring me in because their CEOs and the leadership team aren't doing the process they just bought.
Right.
And they're uncomfortable in the uncomfortable conversations. They aren't going, some of the implementers, great people, but have never been a CEO. I can talk CEO to CEO. You can't BS a BSer. Let's have a real conversation. Let me tell you why I didn't use the EOS process. Let me tell you why I couldn't do scaling up. Let me tell you why all those. Does any of that land with you? Just watch them. Oh, the light bulb goes off, and I thought nobody knew that, and I thought I was faking them out. People know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I want to transition to your book. So, author of Suck to Success, A Guide for Extraordinary Entrepreneurship. And you talked about 3 things in your book. So number 1, you talk about living an extraordinary life. And number 1, you say you define your own success. So if I were to YouTube success, I typically get a lot of the same things, right? Popping back at me. So the world even kind of defines success in a certain way, but you help, CEOs define their own success. So
So if I go to YouTube, I'm probably going to get, I don't know which images you see, but I'm going to get some guy, probably 25 to 35, in San Diego, yacht behind him, bikini models next to him. So he's defined success in that one day that he had enough money to go out and get his picture taken with women he doesn't know on a boat he doesn't own. You feel free to, if that's your definition of success, go for it.
Yeah.
Success is a singular thing. Being extraordinary is a singular event. I know people who make $30,000 a year who live an extraordinary life. I know people who make millions of dollars per year who live a miserable life. It's how we define it. And as their coach, I help them figure that out. And it often is a gut-wrenching experience for people to really stand up and say, this is who I am. This is what I want. And the purpose-driven statement behind it, this is why I want it. That I've had, they just mentioned the guy I talked to this morning. It took him 3 years to get here. I worked with Simon Sinek. It took me 2 years to figure out 2 words for my why: improve lives. It's not watch a video, get a $300 course, and figure all this stuff out. At least I've never seen it. I mean, who knows? I could be wrong. I've never seen it work that way.
Yeah, definitely. The second thing that you talk about is you have to have an attitude to cope with failure.
That was one of the biggest problems I had. And that's where Danny Friedman was so instrumental in shifting my mindset around that and realizing that failure is happening for me, not to me. COVID happens. It's happening for me, not to me. And to recognize and realize that in everything that I do and every time I learn something, the act of learning is because something didn't work. The act of learning is because an old precept, an old mindset has been replaced by a new one. It's a learn. I'm learning. I'm not failing. Now, if I continue to, do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, that's insanity, but it's not failure. And so you were nice enough to allude to the fact that I'm still a recreational baseball player.
Yeah.
Think about baseball. To be Mike Trout, who's by and large considered the best player of 2021. He fails 6.5 out of every 10 times he makes an out. But how many times does he really square up and hit that ball? What's his exit velocity? What's his trajectory? There's a lot more ways to define a successful at bat as a baseball player than just did you get a hit or not get a hit. Because there are times, and I've experienced it, where you square that ball up, you think, oh, that's going to the fence, and some speedy little guy jumps out and makes this highlight-saving catch. Did I fail? Or was he just better positioned or in the right spot, right day, right day? Was he lucky? I mean, who knows? Mm-hmm. But if I only define success as a baseball player is getting a hit, I'm going to suffer in the sport. And there's already enough suffering in life. Let's not add it to our hobbies. Whereas on the days where I cue the ball off the end of the bat and it shoots into right field and hits the chalk on the right field line and goes all the way to the fence and I get a triple in the book, well, one, I'm not that fast. So I mean, someone must have fell down. And two, in which case, where I squared up the ball and the guy dove and caught it versus I cued it, which case did I actually perform the skill of swinging a bat better?
No, I love it. So does that kind of go with the next one, which is basically realizing extreme self-actualization? So you talked about failure and kind of, just becoming aware of what is going on, right? You didn't really fail. It might have just been how you were positioned during that time and just becoming self-aware. So talk about that a little bit.
I find that self-awareness for any leader is very much, it's an inside out journey. And as a coach, I'm often putting, there's the Johari window model of the part I know about me and the part you know about me. We know this. The part I know about me that I don't share with you, so only I know it. The parts about me that I don't know and you don't know. And then there's that part as an external person that you know about me that I don't see. As the coach, that's where I live, because I'm always putting a light onto how you're showing up, how you're performing, what you're doing, what you're not doing, and why you're not doing it. And as I put that, it becomes kind of a hot spotlight for people. But it's in that self-awareness. And why do I do that? Because that's what my coaches had to do for me. And I remember my coach saying, September 9th, 2006, talk about it in the opening of the book where I fire everybody. I'm sitting in the back of my office crying my eyes out because I was a complete and utter failure and this is all my fault. He's like, all right, you get 10 minutes for your pity party. I'm going to go in, I'm going to make some calls. I'm going to come back out here, buck up, stand up, and let's go do some positive things because it's done. It's done. The firing is done. It's time to go on with the rest of your life, because a lot of us will beat ourselves up. And I know I was classic at this for days and months and years on end. It's all my fault. Mm-hmm. We made a decision. The decision's been, we're going to go forward. And it's part of it was to know that I was wired to be very self-critical. He's like, okay, let's change your wiring. I meet Friedland. He talks about, the neuroplasticity. And because he's literally a brain surgeon, he's literally cracked open the skull. And of course, what do I do? Because I'm still having a little bit of pride and ego. I said, that's all BS. I don't agree with you. That's great. Buy yourself a plane ticket. Come to San Diego. I'm going to put you under an MRI machine. And we're going to record me talking to you and how your brain fires. I'm like, cool. I am so coming to San Diego. And I did. And that's where he convinced me with science that how we talk to ourselves to the point of becoming self-actualized and self-aware is so, so important. Think about it too, then, is as we parent. I always think about kids, because kids need parents. As we parent our kids, or as we lead our organization, and how we talk to them and how their brains fire and how we give them confusing messages, and we think we're being helpful, but we're being that quote unquote critical parent. Well, that critical parent is nothing more than a different version of being an imposter syndrome, and it serves us well. Don't put your finger in the light socket is a really good message. I encourage everybody listening today, tell your kids don't do that. Mm. Become an entrepreneur. And that critical parent's driving the car of your life, behind the wheel, saying, you're not enough. You're never going to be enough. You make stupid decisions because you put your finger in the light socket at 4. Not real helpful to a 45-year-old CEO.
Yeah. No, definitely. I'm big on self-awareness and capturing, just knowing myself more each and every day. And I've been kind of on this process to transition about designing my life, and it's just been awesome. And thank you so much for sharing. Guys, make sure you check out the book by Todd, From Suck to Success. Check it out on Amazon bestseller, A Guide for Extraordinary Entrepreneurship. So check that out. Todd, before we end the show today, I have one section I want to go through. But before I do that, 2 more questions I have for you.
Sure.
I like to talk about poison sometimes, and what do you think poisons a CEO?
They're itty bitty shitty committee. I think that's the first thing. It's how we talk to ourselves. Everybody talks about the problems in businesses being four things: cash, strategy, execution, and people. I think that's a symptomatic answer. The root answer is it's always people. It's always people. If you're sacrificing the culture of your company to keep cousin Bob on payroll, that's your choice. And if you're willing to let a high performer leave because cousin Bob is in his department and cousin Bob shows up 3 days a week and you allow that, that's your choice. That's a person making a decision with a ripple effect through the organization. And so that's poisoning. It creates toxicity. If you don't have the tough conversations with your teams, the tough conversations in your homes, you create artificial harmony. And with artificial harmony, then we stack resentments, and then we blow up. And versus, the tough conversations in the moment to clear the room. And I use an issue clearing model that removes the artificial harmony, and it helps people be seen and be heard. And when they're seen and heard, and that we can trust, then they can become known. When we see people, we trust them, we hear them, and we know them. We don't have to agree with them, but we are able to get to a better spot once we're able to clear that artificial harmony. But again, it goes back to the people. So it's the biggest challenge and the biggest gap and the biggest deficit I see in almost every company is the gap in leadership. What I argue, though, as entrepreneurs, no one taught me to lead. As a CEO, I got the title of CEO and president. I went to Kinko's. I had him put it on a business card that I paid for a company I started. That's why I'm the CEO.
Man.
If I didn't get the training around that, I didn't get that training around it because I didn't know any better, which goes to lack of self-awareness. So I become aware. I get the training. I can become aware. I hired a coach. I got better. That's what I've always seen as the poisonous in anybody's business, mine included.
It's always in the people. It's always in the people. The magic and the toxicity is always in the people. So what are you? So let's talk about fears. Last question before we go to the last section of the show. What do you see as a common fear?
Well, so because we've been honest, and you've created a safe space for me, I think I owe you the respect of answering that question. What my fear is, and my fear is I'm going to run out of time. My fear is I'm going to die, and I'm not going to make the impact and everything else. So that was a fear of mine 5 years ago. Started writing my book a year ago. Actually, 14 months ago in January, I'm doing an exercise with a client where we lay out his goals for the year. And the client's become a friend. He was like, "So what are your goals?" And I said, "Well, I want to do this, do this." And last goal on my big list was to finish my book. He's like, "Can I? I love him. Coach, can I give you some coaching?" Sure. He goes, "Your list is reversed. Make your biggest one, your book, your number one goal." I said, "How come?" He goes, that if you literally inverse that pyramid, that's where all the opportunities will come from when your book gets out there. And I thought about it because I do trust him. What am I afraid of? Why am I not finishing that? And there's one of my favorite authors is a guy named Mark Manson. He wrote The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Blank. And in there, he talks about the law of avoidance. And I went back and reread that chapter. I'm like, oh my God, I am afraid of really being seen and being heard. I am afraid of being rejected by society. What I had to do, and I worked with my coach around this, was to recognize that was a fear. So part of the fear, everybody's got fears. Recognize you have it, and recognize what you want to do with it. And he goes, are you going to let your fear going to come from a place of scarcity? Or are you going to pivot it into the potential of the world of abundance that someone, somewhere, someday will read your book? And that someone, somewhere, someday will get impact. And that person's life will be changed by what you wrote. I'm like, okay, I'm afraid I'm going to do it anyways. So that's part of the model, going with fear is like, I'm afraid I'm going to do it anyways. I'm afraid I'm going to do it anyways. I'm afraid I'm going to do it anyways. And that has been transformative for me. So I see that fear. People talk about the fear of success, or I'm sorry, the fear of failure. The law of avoidance is really clear. We're afraid of both succeeding and failing because it threatens our self-identity. I had to work through that.
Yeah, I like that. And I like that. I'm going to tell myself that I'm afraid,
it.
but I'm going to do it anyways.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm going to do it anyways.
Yeah.
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 I mean, I tell this client, he's single. He's like, he goes, I'm afraid of dating. I said, be afraid, do it anyways. I mean, dude, you're a good looking guy. You got a lot of things going for you. But again, it's his imposter syndrome. It's his fear-based mindset.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome, Todd. Well, thank you so much. Any last tips for our listening audience, about your book, about you, about your coaching program?
Brett, I appreciate the question. And I feel that because we've had such a rich conversation today, that I'd like to offer your audience, anybody who comes to my website, extraordinaryadvisors.com, put in there that you've heard me on Brett's show, and I'm going to send you the first chapter of my book for free as my gift to you. It's the value of the book to me is the impact it makes on others. So I'd like to offer that. And certainly anybody who's heard me on the show and wants to have a conversation about how getting you unstuck can work. Like I said, I was telling you in the pre-show, talked to 67 or 42 CEOs in 67 days for free, 30 minutes each, just to help them get unstuck. None of them became clients. I'm happy to do it because the joy I get in the work is from the light bulb moments I receive from the people.
Awesome. No, thank you so much. So make sure you guys check that out. We're going to put that in our YouTube channel description as well. So make sure you check out Todd's website. It's Extraordinary Advisors, right?
Yeah, extraordinaryadvisors.com.
Extraordinaryadvisors.com. Check that out. Todd, before we go here, I have a little section I'm going to end the show with, and this is called Thoughts from Todd. So this is a fun thing. Each answer, maybe just a minute long or so or less, but here we go. So thoughts with Todd. Number one. So Todd, you are a coach, a keynote speaker, thought leader, an author, and a CEO of a business. Which of those things do you enjoy the most?
Being a coach.
Why is that?
I enjoy it because of the impact it makes on others and the joy I receive. It's a mutually beneficial exchange. And when someone has a light bulb moment, it's like raising kids. The first time your kid does something and their eyes just, oh, dude, it just, for me, it's soul-filling, purposeful work.
And you get I think that's the one that you get to see the results, right?
Yeah.
You get to see it. Speaking and author, sometimes you don't get to see it. You probably make a big impact, but you don't get to see it.
Right. And that's okay. And it's like part of it, the fear was, am I making an impact? Like, I'm going to let it go. I always say, I remember when we were putting the book out, I said, I just want one person other than the people who live in my house to actually read the thing and get value out of it. That's all I want from the world.
Awesome. All right, so you said on your website, it's my job to tell it like it is. So can you bluntly tell a struggling entrepreneur why they are sucking so bad?
It's within you. Every external problem in life starts from within. If you're sucking from within, first thing I would say is approach it with self-compassion. Don't be self-critical. If you feel you're sucking, your business is sucking, your marriage is sucking, chances are you're probably doing a really good job of kicking your own butt. How about we stop that? And how about we approach it with self-compassion, recognize that we're ever evolving, ever learning, and then get massively curious about why do you say one thing and then do another? Why do you make a promise and then not follow through? Why do you do what you do? And sit with it, because I believe 80+% of our learning actually happens in our subconscious. Ask yourself those questions. Don't beat yourself up because you don't have the immediate answer.
Awesome. Number 3. So instead of CEO, you sometimes are called CRB, which is the chief rule breaker. So what rules do you break?
The biggest rule I break is to tell people they can actually create the life by design they want. They can actually create an extraordinary life if they want to do the work. And it's, people get angry at me sometimes. I'm like, I can't do it, and I can't this, and I can't, like, someone said to me, I can't do this. And I said, well, you can't or you won't. Either one's fine. Well, I won't. Well, why won't? And we started thinking like, so like an hour later, it's like, so I could do that. It's getting people unstuck.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, 2 more. What's the biggest adventure that you've been on?
Oh, going to Africa. Walking with the cheetahs, did a baseball clinic for the kids in Zambia. It was transformative because I thought I was going to go and give a lot, which I was excited and prepared to do. I received so much from these generous people, from the communities. I received so much. I came back with a greater appreciation for the life I have. and a greater appreciation for the freedoms that I have that maybe some of these people don't have. So it was by far a transformative trip for me.
All right, last one. What do you regret most?
You know, it's an interesting question, and I want to honor it. I think I don't live with a lot of regrets. So I really want to answer your question, Brett. I think if I regret anything, I regret sometimes that pride and ego stood in my way of getting help when I needed it. But I also, I'm going to tell others to practice self-compassion. The immediate thing I go to is, well, I didn't know that I could go out and hire a coach. I didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know. And so, I could say I regret not getting my book done 5 years ago, but I had so many powerful COVID stories in it that I'm glad it came out when it did. I've done a lot of work. So listen, I've done a lot of work to correct my itty bitty negative committee. So I don't have a ton of regrets. I do wish I would have had more awareness of how I showed up as a parent in 2005 to 2008, and to realize the amount of stress and pressure I was under and how that translated into my relationship with my son. He and I have talked about that. We have a great relationship now, but for a long time, I talk about it in the book, we didn't speak for 3 years. That I contributed to that. For a long time, I didn't think I did, but now I've realized with awareness that I have. So now the great thing about it is he lives 15 minutes from my house. I'm having dinner with him this weekend. I talked to him multiple times throughout the course of the month, and we have a great relationship. I wish I would have known what I know now then, but I think that's pretty much a classic in any Beatles song.
Yeah.
If I knew then what I knew, if I know now what I knew then, life would be better. So, but I really don't have a lot of regrets.
That's
thankfully.
awesome.
And I feel blessed to feel that way.
Yes, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Todd, for being on the Brett Snodgrass podcast today. Again, guys, go check out Todd's book, From Suck to Success, The Ultimate Guide to Living an Extraordinary Life. I'm sorry, I butchered that, Todd. From Suck to Success, The Ultimate Guide to Extraordinary Entrepreneurship.
Yes.
There you go. So check that on Amazon.com and go to Todd's website. And Todd, again, that is Extraordinary Advisors.
Yep, Extraordinary Advisors, SORS.com. My email is Todd@extraordinaryadvisors.com. Reach out. We'll get you a free chapter of the book.
Sounds good. Check that out, guys. Make sure you subscribe to the Brett Snodgrass channel on YouTube. And it's a wrap with Todd Palmer. Thanks again, Todd.
Brett, thank you for an enriching conversation.
Thank you so much for checking out the Brett Snodgrass channel. If you like this video, please slam on that like button. And if you really like it, then subscribe to our channel here. And remember to leave us a comment below, and I'm going to try my hardest to reply to all the comments. Thank you guys so much. This is why I do what I do. Every single week, I come out with content that focuses on success, freedom, and living out your purpose. Thank you guys so much. See you next time.